Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. I'm your host, Bill DeFilippo, joined tonight by my co-host, Matt Filipovitz. Matt, what's going on?
Bill, it's a beautiful day here. Penn State is 5-0 ahead of the bye week, and things are about as lovely as they can be.
Is there anything else going on tonight that you don't think is as lovely as Penn State football, Matt?
Well, the Philadelphia Phillies can clinch their first playoff berth in 11
Yes.
years. So I'm very nervous. I'm anxious. That's why we're recording right before it, so I don't have time to stew and think about all of the names that I've had to watch during this drought. Names like Nick Williams, Aaron Altair, Ross Glode, something called Eric Kratz. There's been a lot of bad baseball I've had to watch over the years, and I really just want to go to the playoffs.
God, I used to be an intern for the Williamsport Crosscutters. I'm trying to think if anyone who did Cameron Perkins make it up to the Phillies?
I do not think so.
Does that name ring any bells?
It does not. Unless it's is that the family of who owns the restaurant?
Two big players on that. I'm not certain about that. But the two guys from that Crosscutters team who were like the big names was one, Roman Quinn, who did famously make it up to the Phillies, and then two, guy by the name of Larry Green, who turned down the chance to play football at Alabama to take a huge signing bonus from the Phillies as just like this home run guy and his BP. I would sit there and watch it and just giggle. And then I think he since retired from baseball. But neither here nor there. We're not here to talk about the Philadelphia Phillies or the Williamsport Crosscutters or my beloved Manchester City Football Club. If you are a Manchester United supporter who listens to this podcast, LOL. We're here to talk about the Penn State Nittany Lions. The Nittany Lions, as Matt mentioned, moved to 5-0 on the season and 2-0 in Big Ten play with their 17-7 win over Northwestern. Matt, I have one general thought from this game above everything else. Do you know what that general thought is?
The rain is bad to play football in, I'm guessing.
You are on the right track, but there is one specific thing about this rain, young Matthew, that I want to point out. And that is that this dude, Bob Wischusen from ESPN, do you know the last time he came to Penn State for a football game?
No, but if we're gonna go down this rain path, I'm gonna guess Buffalo 15.
I will give you a hint. It's against the last time there was a lot of rain against a team from that state.
A team from that state? From Illinois?
What state is Northwestern in?
No, I know where Northwest. It's 20 minutes up the road.
Yeah.
Was it 2021? Was it Illinois 2021?
Yeah.
Was it really? Oh, that's a tough assignment.
Bob Wischusen, he seems like a very nice guy, an incredibly nice guy, but also I'm going to need my man to stop calling Penn State football games because they are not fun when he is calling them. But otherwise, Matt, despite that, I also think Bob Wischusen is very, very good at his job. Other than that little riff there, what are just your general thoughts from this football game? My guess is they're going to have a lot to do with the conditions in which they were played.
Yeah, as far as 2-score wins go, this is about as gross as you can get. 17-7 is just an inherently Big Ten West rain score. In terms of things I can take away, it's not much. I don't want to get into the Clifford debate, but I didn't love what I saw out of him, and I'm not going to blame the conditions. Or I'm not going to blame his turnover on the conditions the same way I'm going to blame the running backs' turnovers on the conditions. Fair or not, sure. I just think that's. I think Cliff's mistakes were more him, as I think the running backs' mistakes were more inexperience and wet ball. But I mean, the biggest takeaway is the defense is still pretty good. They held a really talented running back in Evan Hull in check, and they got to win. They got more turnovers. I think they're really hitting their stride. But offensively, I mean, there's not that much I think we should take away from this because again, it was just a gross slugfest that Penn State probably loses if this game happened in 2021, and they won it by 2 scores. So a win is a win is a win, and they get to the bye week 5-0.
Yeah, one thing that we did for today's episode of the pod, and it's kind of going to be the thing that guides our conversation, was we put out on our Twitter account, we wanted listener hot takes. And as you can guess, there was a lot of stuff about the conditions. There was a lot of stuff about the quarterback play. And there, one other thing that Matt mentioned in there is certainly going to come up in this too. But it's like I basically have every single thought that you just laid out. Like, I think this game was, it became pretty evident early on that this was a survive and advance game. This was a gross, nasty football game. And, I'll try to pull up the stat while I talk here, but like, unlike there was that one part at the very end of the game where I was like, ooh, you know what, this is getting a bit tedious. But for the most part, did this feel to you like the Illinois game did at any point? Because to me, I didn't think Northwestern's offense was doing anything well enough other than, one or two pretty fortunate busts in the passing game to ever make me think they were really going to threaten Penn State here.
I was afraid that if the Nittany Lions didn't have that essentially goal line stand in the second half, I thought Northwestern would get it, go for two, and then try to win in a field goal. Because I don't think Northwestern's playing for much other than just, trying to win every game as ugly as possible. Like, you don't play for overtime in that scenario. I think they would have gone for two in those conditions, just to be safe. And I would have been very nervous then, because in that environment, things can get really gross and really weird really quickly. So that was probably the only moment I was really afraid this would be a really bad loss. But once they took the stand, once the defense tightened up, once PJ Mustipher, I think, had his "I'm back" game in this one, 9 tackles, led the team, which is insane for a defensive tackle. I felt a lot calmer. After that, it never really felt like it was going to get close again.
Yeah, I have the stat here. First half, Northwestern had 78 yards on 31 plays, and 65 of them came on 3 plays.
Wow.
I think Northwestern understood that its path to success in this game. I know we saw it on their touchdown. They went right at Abdul Carter and Jalen Reed. They went to the two guys who haven't played nearly enough football to be able to just immediately recognize something and go for it. They go right at them. They're able to get their one touchdown on that. It was let me pull it up here. It was a 47-yard touchdown. So 47 of their 210 passing yards came on that one play that went for a touchdown. Like, I think, and I mentioned this in our preview pod with our friend Ben Gorin, that Northwestern's path to salvation in this game was, we have to get chunk plays. We have to burn this Penn State defense a few times, because we saw, Matt, when they tried to run at this Penn State defense, when they tried to get into a rhythm against this Penn State defense, whether it was because of drop passes or because of general Ryan Holinski-ness, they were unable to really do the stuff they were setting out to do. So, defensive side of the football, I thought they had a spectacular game. Offensive side of the football, Sean Clifford had his worst game of the season. There are two ways to look at this, in my opinion, Matt. One, Sean Clifford had his worst game of the season. The running backs fumbled like crazy. Penn State's offense only scored 17 points. And then I would say there's the more optimistic way of looking at this, which is, despite the fact that Sean Clifford, did not have a particularly great game. I thought the interception was bad, but at a certain point he was, I believe, 8 for 12 during the game. So ends at 10 for 20. He ends the game 2 for his last 8. That's not great, but I didn't think he was as terrible as a lot of people thought for pretty long stretches of that game. So you have that part of it. You have the running game still accrued 220 yards on
That's the story of the game.
Penn State ran the ball 58 times for 220 yards. Their running backs ran for 4 yards per carry. And yes, they struggled to finish drives, but in the face of all of that, I still think if I told you before the football game, they're going to run for 220 yards, they're going to have 360 yards of total offense. They're going to convert 3 for 3 on fourth downs. They're going to have 21 first downs in the game. You hear that stuff, and then you look at the turnovers and the muck of this game, and I think the pill becomes a little, it's still not easy to swallow. It still wasn't a great performance, but I do think it becomes a little easier to swallow.
Yeah, and I think a big reason for that is that the group that played the best offensively is the group that we're all terrified of, and that's the offensive line. Clifford stayed upright. I don't think got sacked at all. His final stat
They played
line
well.
Was, 3 carries for 13 yards with a long of 7. So Cliff stayed upright. So they're finding that mesh. They're finding the right group of guys, which is awesome to see. And then, Katron Allen was suspended, we think, for the first half.
I think Landon Tengwall played every game today.
Every snap.
Listen, we don't want to. Tengwall played every snap. We don't want to sit here and say we know exactly what happened because we don't know what happened. But we've watched enough college football to know when one guy doesn't play the entirety of a half and then he comes into the game and gets, I believe he ended with the most snaps of any running back. He ended tied with Nick Singleton for the most carries in the game. My guess is we could put 2 and 2 together on that one, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, Allen doesn't play in the first half. He still ends it with 21 carries, which is tied with Singleton for the most, and over 86 yards. That's a really telling stat line that the staff ran one of their 3 running backs that gets in the rotation that much in just one half of football. Because there's been times in the past where Penn State's main primary running back, doesn't even get to 21 carries. So that just says a lot about what they were trying to do and what this coaching staff felt like they were able to do. And it's Northwestern. Their strength is always going to be up front. So the fact that the staff still felt like it can attack that is promising. So I like what I'm seeing out of this offensive line, and I think it's only going to get better in non-hurricane conditions.
Yeah, I also really quick thing that I just counted up. Singleton, you mentioned that about Allen getting 21 in the second half. Singleton had 17 of his 21 carries in the first half, and all 4 of his carries in the second half came on Penn State's final drive of the game. So just a little interesting thing to note there.
I think he was in the doghouse.
Do you want to get into some hot takes?
Yes, I would love to get into that.
I mean, we will discuss the fumbles in a second. We will discuss everything in a second. But first, we need to thank the sponsor of this podcast, our friends at Home Field Apparel. You know as well as we know, Home Field Apparel does a whole lot of really great stuff for college sports fans who want to get the gear that goes with their school. Premium collegiate apparel based out of Indianapolis. They are from Big Ten country. Their college football team is about to get big and nude against the mighty Michigan Wolverines this weekend. I am not optimistic. But regardless, the material that they makes the gear that they give you as comfortable, as unique, and as fun as possible. This entire weekend, I wore my St. Peter's joggers.
Nice.
They're fantastic sweatpants that pay tribute to the best college basketball team we have ever seen this side of the 2019-20 Penn State Nittany Lions. If you would like to get your hands on some of their Penn State apparel, they have a Penn State collection of some really great stuff. If you are a new customer, you can use the promo code ROAR Lions Roar, one word, all uppercase, for 15% off of your first order. Again, promo code ROAR Lions Roar, one word, all uppercase, for 15% off of your first order. Thank you very much to Home Field Apparel for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Let's get into some hot takes, Matt. I'm just going to read through them. We have them sectioned off one after the other. We'll devote as much time as we need to a given topic. And first one, I'm grouping together 2 that I think are kind of similar. Okay. One is from Noel, which is the sloppiness in margin meant pretty much nothing because of the conditions. Larry, this is the kind of game we lose past few years. Unsatisfying victory is the mark of real progress for the program. What do you think about that? I mean, I think that we kind of answered Noel's question, which is you and I both think that 90% of the stuff that happened in this game pertained to the conditions. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I think those fumbles probably don't happen in normal conditions. And I think a lot of the defensive turnovers maybe don't happen as easily, let's call it. Like the messed up snap and the blatant overthrow to Jair Brown probably don't happen in normal conditions. But that doesn't mean I don't think Penn State wouldn't have made those plays.
You're putting a lot of faith in Ryan Holinsky there, my friend.
Fair.
But the second one from Larry, this is the kind of game we lose past few years. Unsatisfying victories, mark of real progress for the program. The game that this reminds me of is that Army game in 2015.
Great game.
It was that was a game that always just stuck with me because it was a gross, unsatisfying game. And then after James Franklin had this kind of weird press conference where he said, "Hey, why isn't everyone happy? We won. We're supposed to be happy after we win." Blah blah blah. And I say that to say this. Here's the quote that James Franklin gave about Sean Clifford's performance after this game. He said, "Today was not up to the standard he normally plays at. He did a great job in the run game. He did a great job managing the clock. But I don't think this was one of Sean's best games. And just like I am for the running backs, I am not going to allow the weather to be an excuse." And same thing for the running backs. He said, yes, the conditions were bad, but it does not excuse the ball security issues that they said. So to me, that is the bigger way this is a sign of progress for this program. Yes, I'm not certain they win this game last year, in part because Sean Clifford couldn't move last year. But the big way that I think this game was progress was James Franklin looked at what happened, looked at the fact that they won and said, we were not good enough today. We won, but that does not mean we were good enough. It does not mean we're playing up to the standard that we know we are capable of. So to me, that was the big, if you want to talk about a step forward that we can look at from this game, Matt, that's the big one for me.
Yeah, I really like that this game feels like the first time this season that, how do I want to word this best? A lot of the James Franklin era Big Ten games against the non-basement dwellers, and maybe Northwestern is one, going forward, but I don't think they're really in that Nebraska Rutgers realm just yet. But they've always been a little bit gross. This one didn't feel like it was gross for the usual reasons. Like it felt like it was gross because Penn State was, I don't even want to say beating themselves. They were just beat by bad weather. Like it never really felt like that to me. So that's definitely a promising step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's a weird game. It's a gross game. It's the kind of game that when you play football in the upper Midwest, you're going to have to win at one time or another. And I was really glad to see that Penn State won it because that, again, prior to this, that would have ruined my entire weekend. Next question from our friend Dan. Our sweet son, Nicholas Singleton, was just being a great teammate and unselfish person, allowing the defense to get even better with the extra reps. Matt, love the optimism.
I do as well. Is it accurate? Probably not. I will say I do like that Nick Singleton. I like that Nick Singleton got to share reps because Devin Ford is, I guess, unfortunately, no longer part of the program. We wish him nothing but the best. Yes. I think you and I are both humongous Devin Ford fans. We both, I think, really think highly of that guy. And if he does resume his career elsewhere, I will be rooting for him as hard as I've ever rooted for a transfer from Penn State. But depth now means more. Having that depth is now way more important. So the fact that Singleton didn't have to get 40 carries in the rain because he was benched for fumbles maybe ends up being a good thing.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is that, I went back and I watched some of the highlights and I thought Singleton was a lot better than he has been in previous games about just go to where you're supposed to go. Don't try and bounce it and go for 50 yards when you have 4 or 5 yards. I did think he did that a little better than he has in past weeks. And I think that's an important sign of progress for him. That is really the one thing I think most Penn State fans would say. If there is one area where I'm not super happy with how Singleton has performed, it is his desire to break the big one. And I think he was a lot more patient, a lot more willing to take what the defense gave him. His touchdown run, where he basically just weight roomed someone on Northwestern's defense, that was really cool. But
that's a turning point for him.
Again, ball security. Yes.
Yeah, that run was unlike anything we've seen him do.
He just has to be better protecting the football.
Yeah, that run was unlike anything I've ever seen him do. Like, if you think about Singleton's runs, they're always, he runs by everybody and then his celebration is nothing. He showed a lot of emotion after that touchdown. Like, you can even see in the broadcast, you can see Juice Scruggs like grinning ear to ear from seeing that kind of emotion. Yeah. So I think that shows that that's something that he's had to work on and learn how to do. And that was that work coming together in one cool moment.
Yeah, I completely agree. He had a good game. He had outside of the fumbles, I think he played a really solid football game. Moving on to this take from Darian. Rufus the Bobcat is a better mascot than Willie the Wildcat. I don't have a strong opinion here, other than to say one time the guy in a Rufus the Bobcat costume punched Brutus the Buckeye. So that was cool.
I don't know who Rufus the Wildcat is, but if we're going in terms of like who has punched somebody, I guess I got to give it to Rufus the Wildcat. Also, remember the time you punched me at a big Penn State Media Day in the tunnel of Beaver Stadium?
I'm sure you deserved it.
You actually went for a hug, and I went one way and you went another way, and you accidentally punched me right in the face.
The cool thing is, and if you are listening to this podcast, you probably noticed this by now, but we're having a tiny bit of an audio issue with a lag with Matt. So the fact that there was just like that nice 5-second pause in me saying that he deserved to get punched in the face during a media day probably translates really well.
Nick will edit it out in post.
No, he probably won't, and that's fine. Let's get on to the next things that we have, which are it's the Sean Clifford takes from Patty. Penn State beat writers talk Sean Clifford the same way Sixers podcasters used to talk about Ben Simmons. CJ, if the weather was not so bad, Aller would have been in the game at some point. Noel, Sean Clifford should be sent to a black site prison for some of those throws.
Jesus.
I will just start and go really quickly here. The interception, yeah, it's Noel, who I've never heard of this person. This is not his 15th time making a Twitter account because Twitter keeps getting mad at him.
Oh, it's that Noel?
What I will say about Sean is that I don't know who you're talking about. So what I'll say about Sean is that, yes, this was his worst game of the season. I think that, he missed a couple of throws. He after that incompletion to Washington, I believe, which was like, that is a throw he has to make, even if I do think Tangwall was getting pushed into him, and that kind of didn't let him set his feet. Right after that, there were a couple of just throwaways that I think made some fans a little bit upset that I just don't necessarily think were on him. But my general point here, and this kind of goes to all of these questions, and then kind of just the general Sean Clifford of this all. And it's a take that Donnie Collins of the Scranton Times-Tribune said. All that's to say, friends, we had some audio issues. We had to restart where we were. We were in the middle of our conversation about Sean Clifford, and I'm going to start by just really quickly giving a hat tip to Donnie Collins of the Scranton Times-Tribune, who tweeted, "When you're 5-0, you have no quarterback country. There may be one in controversy. There may be one in the stands and on the couch in the man cave at home, but there isn't one in the coach's office where it matters the most." And I was just going to say, for all the stuff that folks said about Sean Clifford and the hot takes they sent over, something that I find really instructive, Matt, is that at no point in the game, with how Sean was struggling, and even James Franklin said after the game that game was not up to par, up to the standard we expect for him. We didn't see Drew Auer warming up and getting ready to come in. I think in a lot of the situations that people will reference, Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams at Oklahoma, Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa at Alabama, Trevor Lawrence and Kelly Bryant, Jake Fromm and Justin Fields, all the ones that get thrown out as a potential mirror for this. That backup was getting opportunities in in like higher leverage situations than when Auer tends to come in. And I do think it was pretty instructive despite all of that. And fans can think this is a good thing, is a bad thing, whatever they want to say. But I think it's very instructive that at no point did we have any indication that the coaching staff thought Drew Auer was going to come into this football game.
Yeah, you know my thoughts. Our listeners know my thoughts on this whole ordeal. And I think this kind of confirms that this is Clifford's team until they lose. I'll still stand by that until they lose, and maybe even at this point until they lose 2. So it's kind of time for us to maybe put the Aller talk on the back burner. I don't think it's gonna, but I think it.
Oh no,
it may not be. It may not be as relevant as I thought it was going to be coming out of this week.
Yeah, backup quarterback's most popular guy on campus, as we all know. But this is a conversation that I wish we could just stop it in general, because at no point have we had any indication of this. But I do think the time to revisit it is after the Ohio State game, after Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio State. If Penn State goes 3-0 during that stretch with Sean Clifford as their quarterback, build that man a goddamn statue on campus somewhere. If he goes 2-1, Penn State is firmly in the Big Ten mix and potentially firmly in the mix to sneak into the back end of the college football playoff. If he goes 1-2, if he goes 0-3, then maybe the conversation changes up a bit, but we'll have to wait and see. It leads to the next hot take, which is from Dan. Because of Franklin's loyalty, parentheses, to a fault, Drew Auer will start 0 games this season. PSU will then lose a game they should win, and floated Maryland as a potential game where that can happen, which, we'll talk about Maryland as we get closer, but there are some reasons I think to be concerned there. Kind of going back to what we just said. One, I would still generally probably think, even if Penn State goes 0-3 or 1-2, well, if they go 1-2, if they go 0-3, it's a different conversation. If they go 1-2 that stretch, my guess is Clifford is still the team's starting quarterback. Lose a game they should win, though, is really interesting, Matt, because do you think, we'll say Penn State's supposed to lose to Michigan and Ohio State. Well, just for the purpose of this conversation, can we agree on that? Quote unquote, supposed to lose.
Yeah, I think those are the only 2 games they'll be underdogs in.
Yeah. And then, so let's go Minnesota at Indiana, Maryland at Rutgers, Michigan State. Do you think there are any games in there where having Sean Clifford as the quarterback will be would or could be the thing that costs Penn State to lose a game?
Depends what Sean Clifford. If we get Northwestern Sean Clifford against Maryland or Minnesota, yes. Everything else, no. I think Michigan State's the worst team in the Big Ten by far.
I think the team Penn State plays right before them is worse. But yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, but also, like we mentioned, let's get to November, see what happens with this next 3 weeks of football, and then see what happens with the quarterback position, because there's the potential that they decide to pull the ripcord. But there's also the school of thought, I would say, that let's say they do go 1-2 through that stretch. Penn State ends the season 10-2. Penn State's going to a New Year's 6 game, especially because Penn State will end the season going undefeated for the final month of the year, and so much of it in college football is when you lose. So I don't know. It's an interesting question, but I don't think Sean Clifford will explicitly be the reason Penn State loses any football games this year.
Yeah, I'm not ready to jump off of that side of the coin just yet, just because I think if he plays like he did against Northwestern, against Michigan and Ohio State especially, that is going to be the reason, because the defense can keep him in it.
Well, that I disagree to an extent, but that's a conversation for another day, another time. Noel, Another Noel is from Long Island, so he has a lot of hot takes. It was good that our turnover luck happened to switch it up against a horror team.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll let you take this one. Go ahead.
This is like I hadn't even thought about this. This is the best take I've seen. I think Penn State's the only. This is like I saw this stat earlier today. Penn State's the only team in the country to win a 5 turnover game this year. Like in the sense that they were the ones who had the turnovers. And I think against any other team, that's probably a loss. But this is the best possible team to have it against. And I hope if you had to learn this hard lesson, I am glad it happened in this way.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. I'm not a huge believer in the concept of turnover luck, just because I think that turnovers are, they could be a make your own luck thing. And I think that when you looked at how Penn State had their turnovers happen, I think, they were, with the exception of Clifford's turnover, I do think they were generally related to, I will disagree with James Franklin here. I think they were generally related to the elements. So I don't know. I will put it this way. I hope Noel is right, and I hope Penn State continues to be the team that we saw in not rainy conditions when it comes to turnovers, because that would be a really nice development. Moving on to this take from Lewis. This year's defense is better than last year's, Matt.
This is tough.
How about this? Let's go level by level. Let's go defensive line, linebackers, secondary. Because there's the totality of it. There's the sheer fact that like the way that they're coached by Manny Diaz is different than how they were coached by Brent Pry.
Right. They're more exciting this year, but does that mean they're better? That's the big question.
Right. I mean, I think that we saw in this game the like drawback, so to speak, of Manny Diaz's defense. How was Northwestern able to accrue yards? And it was on big plays. Their longest run was 29 yards. They had receptions of 22, 47, 24, 15, and 18. I am not going to plug them into my calculator right now. I will while you're talking, but my hunch is of their 241 yards, that would be most of them. But we also have seen with how Penn State forces turnovers, with how Penn State can create havoc plays, that it's a step up. So let's go level by level. Defensive line, how do you think this one compares? So when PJ Mustipher was still around last year, how do you think it compares to last year's at its best?
Better. PJ's playing better, I think. He hit his stride. Hakeem Beamon had his coming out party this past week. I think Chop is playing. I think Chop's playing like a top 5 defensive end in the Big Ten, maybe even the country ? Right now.
There's an easy thing that you can cite to prove this, and I'm glad that you're not, because it would make me mad.
That's why I didn't say who I could cite for it. And then,
thank you.
I mean, Tarburton's still Tarburton. Deny Dennis Sutton's getting there. I mean, Vanover. The defensive line's better. Yeah, definitively for me.
I think they lack the just game-wrecking guy of the caliber of Arnold Ebiketie. And I do think, I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year, we're talking about a guy like Chop Robinson or Adisa Isaac as that kind of consistent game wrecker. I mean, passing down, Ebiketie pinned his ears back and he was able to get home. Like, he was able to just create those kinds of plays in the backfield. I think two guys who are underrated in this conversation, what Jesse Lukita was able to give them last year, that got him onto an NFL roster. And what Derek Tangelo gave them up the middle is just like that little bit of extra beef was something that was really useful. I'm going to kind of cop out here, which is I'm going to go back to my take from the beginning of the season, which is, I've had it throughout the season. I think that between the start of the season and the end of the season, Penn State's defensive line is going to grow more than any other unit on this team. And I will say that they are on pace. Their trajectory is to be better than last year's. We'll see with injuries and stuff like that. But I do think that as of right now, I'd probably take last year's just because Ebiketie, Lukita, Tangelo, Mustipher they were such a solid defensive line. But I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the season, I'm changing my tune on that. Linebackers, this one's easy.
Oh, is it?
I think so.
Your 2021 was better, right?
I let me say this. I think that the guys at the very top in 2021, Ellis
Mm-hmm.
Brooks, Brandon Smith, Curtis Jacobs, were better and will probably continue to be better than Jonathan Sutherland, Tyler Elsdon, Curtis Jacobs. What I will say is that if any one of those guys went out last season, I didn't feel especially great about what they had beyond them. But this year, if Curtis Jacobs has to go out, Jonathan Sutherland has to go out, Tyler Elsdon have to go out, and you get a Kobe King, a Jamari Button, an Abdul Carter, whomever else in there, I think that's how it's better. But I would say at the top level, no, I would take last year's linebacking core.
Okay. I'm an Ellis Brooks stan. Always have been, always will be. The Abdul Carter of it all is what's throwing me off here. Can I rattle off a hot take right now, Bill, and you let me know if it's too spicy?
It probably is if you're going to try to run it by me, but yeah, go ahead.
Abdul Carter's a better linebacker already than Brandon Smith ever was.
I don't know about that because I think Brandon Smith's.
Okay.
I think going downhill and attacking the football, Abdul Carter is a lot more. Because what was the thing with Brandon Smith? He wanted to thud guys. He wanted to try and create that big play, and they would avoid wrapping dudes up. I will say that I think Abdul Carter is a more safe and secure, and like he does stuff he is supposed to do better. Brandon Smith. I think his athleticism, his big play potential, the fact that they seemed to be comfortable using him in passing as a pass defender. That is something I will give him as a heads up. I don't think he's better yet, but I do they gave him 11. I think he is on track to be better.
I think he.
He got beat for the touchdown, and I don't remember that sort of thing happening. I could be wrong. I don't remember that sort of thing happening to Brandon Smith. But again, that's something that I think will come with experience.
I think Abdul might be better already. I don't know. I have to really take a step back and really formulate this thought, which I may do in real time right now. Somebody made a point in our Twitter Spaces post Auburn, and I'm so sorry I can't remember this gentleman's name, but he made a point that if Abdul Carter doesn't get ejected for targeting against Purdue, does that game end differently? Is that a safer win for Penn State? And the more I watch Abdul Carter, the more I think he might have been onto something.
It's possible.
I don't know, man. Maybe I think I might take this year's group just because I think that highly of current Curtis Jacobs, what we already have in Abdul Carter, and then I think the sum of the rest of the parts can equate to what Ellis Brooks gave them. I think I'll go with 22, which I'm stunned to be saying out loud, but Abdul Carter has given me that much confidence.
Cool. And then the secondary, I think you will agree with my take, which is that this year's secondary is better.
Yes.
The only the difference is I think I wish we had Jaquan Brisker in this secondary because that guy was really good. But other than that, this secondary is better.
Go Bears.
Go Bears. Let's move on to our penultimate hot take from Kyle. Parker Washington is better than KJ Hamler. Sean Clifford just can't get the ball to him. What do you think about that one, Matt?
Better receiver, yes. Better playmaker, no.
I'm inclined to disagree with that just because. Okay. Well, it's a tough question because
it is really hard. This is a great question.
I don't think Parker Washington. I don't think he can do what KJ Hamler did against Ohio State in 2018, where he runs that slant and just takes it 95 yards.
Yes.
I don't think he can do what KJ Hamler did against Maryland, where he catches a pass and slaloms through their defense and gets into the end zone. I just think KJ Hamler's speed and agility and explosiveness, and something that I have mentioned on this podcast plenty of times, my fear about the inability of the receivers to kind of take the top off and create that thing in the passing game. I think Parker Washington just like he can't do that. He can't do that stuff. What I will say about Parker is his refinement as a route runner and his hands are both very, very good. I think he and KJ are almost different kinds of receivers because
Yes.
I think that Parker, very lazy comparison, one that I'm just coming off the top of my head. I think Parker is like the Wes Welker, where his technique and his route running ability and his hands make him just such a surefire receiver. But I think KJ was more of like, the guy who can just create a big play out of nothing. Sean Clifford just can't get the ball to him. It's actually interesting because Sean Clifford's best pass of the day was a deep shot to Parker Washington for 43 yards when he dropped it in the bucket for him. So I
Cliff's
do.
problem's
I
never been
do
he can't make throws. It's that he makes bad decisions on what throws to make. Like, I disagree with that part of the question too.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a point made by Thomas Frank Carr over at BWI, but like Clifford's deep ball accuracy the first 4 weeks of the season was something like single digits or low double digits, when in past years it was slightly above average. So I do disagree with that, but I will say KJ. I do think KJ is the answer to that.
Okay, I'm going P-Dub.
Cool. And last one, before we get into game balls and just generally how we feeling. Justin said Franklin has turned the corner as a coach and will compete for a Big Ten title / playoff berth in the next 3 years.
Love this question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big picture question. What I will say about Franklin is I think people always want to, they want to do frames Janklin. They want to talk about how bad he is as an in-game coach, blah, blah, blah. I don't think there have been any situations this season where I felt like James Franklin hurt Penn State as a coach. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree.
Like, there wasn't a boneheaded timeout or clock management decision, unless there's something I can't think of and you recall.
No, it's still early, though.
Sure, still early. So what are we talking about James Franklin as a coach? If he's handed off the offense to Mike Yurcich, if he's handed off the defense to Manny Diaz, if he's not messing up, doing the James Franklin moment or whatever thing, what are we talking about him as a coach? We're then talking about the stuff that we've always trusted him on, which is recruiting, building a program, identifying talent, that sort of thing. And what I will say is that as long as Franklin isn't going out there and doing the Joe Paterno calling all 3 of your timeouts on the first drive against Alabama only to get a field goal thing, just as long as he's not getting in the way, I'm going to feel pretty good about him. And I just don't, if you want to say he's turned the corner as a coach because he's getting out of the way, that's fair. But I think we're seeing it with John Harbaugh in the NFL. When decisions work out, you're a good coach. When decisions don't work out, you're considered a bad coach.
Yeah. I can't remember if I've ever given this take on the podcast or if this is purely slack. Penn State's a window program. And what I mean by that is if they're going to make the playoffs, it's because they've built to a window year. The non-window programs are Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State, where the window to make the playoff is every year because you spend more, you recruit better. Penn State is like USC, Oklahoma, Michigan, Oregon, Florida State, Texas A&M if they ever get there. There are these programs that are good enough to make a playoff and maybe win a natty, but it's when they've built the roster into a window that aligns with something that allows them to get there. I think with the way they're recruiting, with Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, Abdul Carter, the recruiting classes that we're stacking, the way they're playing the transfer portal game, I think 2023 and 2024 are window years. If you're going to make it, that's the window. 2017 was a window year. 2016 was not a window year. That 16 roster was built for 17 to be the year, and they arrived early. I think we could be heading down a very similar path depending on how these next 3 weeks go, in that this is the year that we're gaining experience and confidence for the window year or years, depending on how well things mash, if guys even stick around. So I think we're building towards window years, and that's all you can ask for, because the last window year was 5 years ago at this point. And for a program like Penn State, the window is going to be about once every 5 years.
Well, the thing is that how do you change that? You basically do buy into kind of, for lack of better words, James Franklin's kind of vision of college football, right? Which is that you have to invest to have if Ohio State is spending 15 million on stuff, you have to spend 15 million in $1. You have to be willing to do all that stuff. And if Penn State's not going to do that, you have to accept you're going to have fewer bites at the apple. The thing Franklin mentioned about single player dorms or whatever nearly cost them denied Dennis Sutton. That sort of thing matters now. So, to me, unless your coach is actively getting in the way all the time, then it's not that. Then that stuff's overrated. You can go down the list of every single coach in the history of the sport of football, except for, maybe Saban, maybe Belichick, and go, here are the times that they have actively hurt their football team's ability to win a game. So the bigger thing is that big picture stuff. And Franklin seems like he's committed towards getting that stuff built to Penn State. Pat Kraft seems like he's committed to getting that stuff built to Penn State. So for now, yes, I think you're right. And the hope is that, sooner rather than later. And, maybe the football team about 15 minutes that way here in Columbus, Ohio makes that a little bit more difficult, but maybe 10, maybe your window goes from 1 year to 2 years and you just have that kind of a window. Maybe you're able to get past Goliath and it's just constantly open. Who knows? But I think that, 5-0, recruiting's going well. Still early in the season. The tough stuff is coming in the coming days. In the coming weeks. You feel good about the health of the program. But I guarantee, if Penn State goes into Ann Arbor and Penn State loses that game, 35-21, and it's for no reason other than Michigan is better, this conversation goes completely out the window in the eyes of a lot of people. Even if the result is bad, it won't matter if you have good process, because it's a results driven enterprise college.
That's why I'm doing this as a window. And real quick, before I forget, 20 should have been a window year. 2020 was a window year. If the pandemic didn't happen, Clifford coming off of a great 2019, Journey Brown, Pat Fryermuth, Micah Parsons, Adafe Owe, Shaka Tony. God, that team would have rocked. 20 was a window year. And this year is building for a window year in 23 and 24.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Let's get back. Thank you, everyone, for sending in your hot takes. Let's get into...
Yeah, those were all great.
Let's start to wrap up this podcast first with game balls. How about this? Instead of saying an offensive one and a defensive one, blah, 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 I will say, Matt, you can hand out 3. Who are getting your 3 game balls regardless of where they play in this game?
Hakeem Beamon, my king, has arrived. Great game out of him. Loved what I saw. Brenton Strange is really finding his stride in a really fun and exciting way. And I think we're going to see some fun Theo Johnson things because of Brenton Strange's emergence here in the coming weeks. And my last one I will give to Jalen Reed. I think he's starting to find his home a little bit.
Yeah, Theo Johnson, his one catch of the game. Strange only had one catch for 20 yards, and it was Penn State's early touchdown, but I thought he had a nice game as a blocker. And then Theo Johnson, his one catch was on that weird play where they just they roll Clifford out far to his right and then throws it back and has Johnson there. So I thought that was a interesting play design. I'll give mine to PJ Mustipher. I thought the way that he won up front consistently meant whatever chance Northwestern had at running the football just did not exist. I thought Mustipher completely ate. I'm going to give one to Jake Pinniger, made both of his extra points, made his only field goal of the game. And I know that Penn State, part of the reason that I was able to feel a little bit less concerned, I was able to breathe a little bit was because Pinniger made his only field goal attempt, which came early on in the fourth quarter. It was a 38-yarder, again, in nasty conditions. Made it a 2-possession game, and I think he just deserves a lot of credit for that because, Jake Pinniger hasn't always been a guy that you can trust in the kicking game, but so far this season, he's 4 for 6. He's missed 2 PATs, but generally been all right. I haven't felt like Jake Pinniger is going to be a person that calls Penn State games. The last one, Barney Moore, like he's just been outstanding. He has been so good this year as Penn State's punter. Like he's just so good at just pinning teams deep. Big Ten special teams player of the week this week. I think he deserves a lot of credit for his performance. And you consistently make Northwestern have to go down a long field. They're going to struggle with that. So shout out to him. Let's end with just this last thing, Matt, which is heading into the bye week now. Penn State's 5-0. They're a top 10 team in this crazy sport of college football that we love very much. They're number 14th nationally in SP Plus, one spot ahead of the indomitable Will Levis and the Kentucky Wildcats. Just how you feeling so far as we've reached the opportunity in the season, and we'll talk more about this on pods later in the week, but the first time in the season where we could just like take that collective breath and go, okay, let's use this weekend to go apple picking or something.
It's fun. It's like a fun season. Like it's combining the two things I really like in that it's giving these upperclassmen and seniors especially a chance to go out playing some really awesome football. PJ Mustafer, Barney Moore, Joey Porter Jr., Sutherland's getting on the field more, Juice Scruggs. Like it's giving them their chance to go out on a high note, hopefully. And we're seeing a young infusion of talent, which is making me excited for the future. Like it's like the perfect marriage of what I want in a college football team. And that's been the coolest part for me.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I don't think that they are a perfect football team by any stretch of the imagination. No. Like I think they are going to lose 2 games. They could potentially lose 3 or more. I mean, we saw last season how quickly things can spiral from a position of we're in the top 5 and we feel pretty good about things. I mean, they were 5-0 walking into Kinnick, the number 4 team in college football. And then because of 2 injuries, the wheels came off of the entire thing. But I also think that you shouldn't think about football that way. I don't think you should think about football going, well, if someone gets hurt, because like that's a thing that applies to every team. If CJ Stroud rolls out and throws the football and plants his left leg awkwardly and tears his ACL, that changes the complexion of Ohio State season completely. If Blake Corum is, he's running around for Michigan, he plants his foot wrong, he does something to his ankle and he's out for the season, that change. Like this is a thing that exists for everyone. So I just don't think paying too much attention to that is a good, what's the word I'm looking for? Is a good use of your time. Yeah. But what I will say is that if this Penn State team stays healthy and continues to go down the trajectory they're going down, which is a pretty positive and optimistic one, this team should win 10 games. And coming into this season, I thought this team was going to win 8 games. And they have cleared 2. They have cleared 2 of the hurdles that I thought were going to potentially slip them up. Now, they can lose to Michigan, they can lose to Minnesota, they can lose to Ohio State, they can lose to Maryland. Maybe that's how they get to 8-4 on the season. I don't know. But it certainly feels like this team and the program as a whole is in a much better place than I anticipated it being even, 1 month and 3 days ago.
Bill, can I ask you one last question before we get out of here? And if you don't want to answer it, you can completely ignore it and just go right into the outro. I just want to get your thoughts because I asked a friend of the podcast, Stanley, about this as well.
Okay.
What's more likely, 8-4 or 11-1?
Probably 8-4.
Okay, interesting.
And that's more because like I think Ohio State is excellent, and I think like going into Ann Arbor, I'm just never going to feel confident in that. So
Okay.
like again, going into this season, I thought they were losing to Michigan and Ohio State. I
Mm-hmm.
still think they are losing to Michigan and Ohio State. So just like the general premise of that question, I would say it is more likely that, you know, when they take punches from a Minnesota team that when they have Mohamed Ibrahim in there, they're a really dangerous football team. From a Maryland team that I don't know if they're good week to week, if they're good play to play, if they're good week to week, but I know if you get them on the wrong week, they're going to throw the football on you and score points. Even if I think very highly of Penn State secondary, so I would say 8-4 in all likelihood. I know you think it's 11-1, right?
Correct.
Yeah. What makes you say that?
If they go 8-4, they have to lose 2 of the 5 quote unquote winnable games. The whiteout at night against Minnesota. Do you think that's toss up, or you think Penn State's going to be a double-digit favorite?
I think Penn State will be a favorite in that game. I need to know more about the health of Mohamed Ibrahim, and I want to see what they do against an Illinois team that I think is really tough.
Yeah.
Yes.
But they
and
get
I
them
want
at
to see
home.
what they do having to go to Illinois the week before the whiteout. Nope.
Yeah.
Illinois. Oh, I thought you were talking about Illinois. Yeah, they get them. Don't get me wrong. I think Penn State wins that game. But if you're asking me if I think it's more likely that Penn State loses this game or Penn State beats Ohio State, I would go down. I would say Penn State loses this game.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Yeah, I just can't see them losing at home to Minnesota. At home against Maryland. Rutgers is terrible, but respectable slowly. Michigan State's fraudulent. Indiana's bad. Like I can't see them losing one of those games just with how, because if they were to lose those games, they would have lost to Northwestern with how that game went. I think this solidified that take to me, that this is more likely to go 11-1 than 8-4, because I think they could steal one. James Franklin in year 9 has to steal one here. Not in like a job security sense, but in that, like, you can shut up a lot of people if you steal one of Michigan or Ohio State.
I don't know about that. I think Franklin is one of those coaches that people have had their opinions on from day one. I am from back in his SEC days, and I think that he's I don't think that changes that. I mean, think about the 2016 team. Like, the 2016 team did exactly what they had to do. Like, they did everything that you expect James Franklin to have to do in order to start shutting people up. And then what happened? 2017, they lose that game to Ohio State. The chirping comes back out. They lose to Michigan State the week later. It's back out in full force. So I agree with your general stance, but this is a broader conversation about Franklin that we can have some other time. Maybe this is off-season content. I don't know, but I think he's a guy that a lot of people. I think he's a guy that a lot of people have made up their minds on him, and even if he goes 15-0 and wins a national championship, I don't think he's going to be a guy who changes a lot of minds anytime soon. But that's a conversation for another day. Matt, any final thoughts before I wrap up this pod?
That's all I got. Enjoy the bye week. We'll be back some point this week with some fun midweek minis, if you want to call them that.
Yeah, we'll try to figure out some fun stuff to do during this week off. If you decide just to ignore football for the next couple of days, you should do that. It's going to be fun. We have some fun stuff come up in the cards next week for Penn State's game against Michigan as well. Be on the lookout for that. But for now, as always, thank you everyone for listening to this edition of the podcast. As always, make sure you are subscribing wherever you go and get your podcast. Head to the Linktree link in our Twitter bio for the list of everywhere you can go to get the pod. If you are using a podcasting service where you can, please rate and give us a 5-star review. Please make sure you're giving us a follow on our Twitter account. And again, one more time, if you use the promo code ROAR, Lions Roar, one word, all uppercase, for your first order at Home Field Apparel, you can get 15% off. One last time, thank you everyone for listening to this edition of Roar Lions Roar. For my co-host Matt Filipovitz, I'm Bill DeFilippo. Take care, everyone.